The Spiderwick Chronicles by Tony DiTerlizzi and Holly Black. The front cover shows us the title of the book, The Spiderwick Chronicles, and the names of the authors. It also shows us a picture of 3 children looking at a book together. One is holding a candle, using it to light the pages as the other reads. At the bottom, it tells us this is Book 1, The Field Guide. If we turn to the back cover, we can see the blurb. Except with this book, the blurb has been covered over by a leaf which states, "Go away, close the book, put it down, do not look." Despite this, we can still make out the words at the top. 3 ordinary kids, Jared, Simon and Mallory Grace. And then at the bottom the line, "The truth lies within." If we turn the pages to the table of contents, we can see a full list of the chapters, each of which has a title, and next to it, the number of the page that we would need to turn to find each chapter. The map of the Spiderwick estate and surrounding areas shows us lots of locations that we may be introduced to in the story. For a closer look, log into your Active Learn, but for now, let's get started. Chapter 1, in which the Grace children get acquainted with their new home. If someone had asked Jared Grace what jobs his brother and sister would have when they grew up, he would have had no trouble replying. He would have said that his brother, Simon, would either be a veterinarian or a lion tamer. He would have said that his sister, Mallory, would either be an Olympic fencer or in jail for stabbing someone with a sword. But he couldn't say what job he would grow up to have. Not that anyone asked him. Not that anyone asked his opinion on anything at all. The new house, for instance. Jared Grace looked up at it and squinted. Maybe it would look better blurry. "It's a shack," Mallory said, getting out of the station wagon. It wasn't really, though. It was more like a dozen shacks had been piled on top of one another. There were several chimneys, and the whole thing was topped off by a strip of iron fence sitting on the roof like a particularly garish hat. "It's not so bad," their mother said with a smile that looked only slightly forced. "It's Victorian." Simon, Jared's identical twin, didn't look upset. He was probably thinking of all the animals he could have now. Actually, considering what he'd packed into their tiny bedroom in New York, Jared figured it would take a lot of rabbits and hedgehogs and whatever else was out here to satisfy Simon. "Come on, Jared," Simon called. Jared realised that they had all crossed to the front steps and he was alone on the lawn, staring at the house. The doors were a faded grey, worn with age. The only traces of paint were an indeterminate cream, stuck in deep crevices and around the hinges. A rusted ram's head door knocker hung from a single heavy nail at the centre. Their mother fit a jagged key into the lock, turned it, and shoved hard with a shoulder. The door opened into a dim hallway. The only window was halfway up the stairs, and its stained glass panes gave the walls an eerie reddish glow. "It's just like I remember," she said, smiling. "Only cruddier," said Mallory. Their mother sighed, but didn't otherwise respond. The hallway led into a dining room. A long table with faded water spots was the only piece of furniture. The plaster ceiling was cracked in places, and a chandelier hung from frayed wires. "Why don't you 3 start bringing things in from the car?" their mother said. "Into here?" Jared asked. "Yes, into here." Their mother put down her suitcase on the table, ignoring the eruptions of dust. "If your great-aunt Lucinda hadn't let us stay, I don't know where we would have gone. We should be grateful." None of them said anything. Try as he might, Jared didn't feel anything close to grateful. Ever since their dad moved out, everything had gone bad. He'd messed up at school, and the fading bruise over his left eye wouldn't let him forget it. But this place was the worst yet. "Jared," his mother said as he turned to follow Simon out to unload the car. "What?" His mother waited until the other 2 were down the hall before she spoke. "This is a chance to start over. For all of us, okay?" Jared nodded grudgingly. He didn't need her to say the rest of it. That the only reason he hadn't gotten kicked out of school was because they were moving anyway. Another reason he was supposed to be grateful. Only he wasn't. Outside, Mallory had stacked 2 suitcases on top of a steamer trunk. I heard she's starving herself to death. Aunt Lucinda, she's just old, Simon said. Old and crazy. But Mallory shook her head. I heard Mum on the phone. She was telling Uncle Terence that Aunt Lucy thinks little men bring her food. What do you expect? She's in a nut house, Jared said. Mallory went on like she hadn't heard him. She told the doctors the food she got was better than anything they'd ever tasted. You're making that up. Simon crawled into the back seat and opened one of the suitcases. Mallory shrugged. If she dies, this place is going to get inherited by someone and we're going to have to move again. Maybe we can go back to the city, Jared said. Fat chance, said Simon. He took out a wad of tube socks. Oh no, Geoffrey and Lemondrop chewed their way loose. Mum told you not to bring the mice, Mallory said. She said that you could have normal animals now. If I let them go, they'd get stuck in a glue trap or something, said Simon, turning a sock inside out, one finger sticking out a hole. Besides, you brought all your fencing junk. It's not junk, Mallory growled, and it's not alive. Shut up! Jared took a step towards his sister. Just because you've got one black eye doesn't mean I can't give you another one. Mallory flipped her ponytail as she turned towards him. She shoved a heavy suitcase into his hands. Go ahead and carry that if you're so tough. Even though Jared knew he might be bigger and stronger than her someday, when she wasn't 13 and he wasn't 9, it was hard to picture. Jared managed to lug the suitcase inside the door before he dropped it. He figured he could drag it the rest of the way if he had to, and no one would be the wiser. Alone in the hallway of the house, however, Jared no longer remembered how to get to the dining room. 2 different hallways split off this one, winding deep into the middle of the house. Mom? Although he'd meant to call out loudly, his voice sounded very soft, even to himself. No answer. He took a tentative step, and then another, until the creak of a board under his feet stopped him. Just as he paused, something inside the wall rustled. He could hear it scrabbling upwards until the sound disappeared past the ceiling. His heart beat hard against his chest. It's probably just a squirrel, he told himself. After all, the house looked like it was falling apart. Anything could be living inside. They'd be lucky if there wasn't a bear in the basement and birds in all the heating ducts. That was, if the place even had heat. Mom? He said again, even more faintly. Then the door behind him opened and Simon came in, carrying mason jars with 2 bug-eyed grey mice in them. Mallory was right behind him, scowling. I heard something, Jared said, in the wall. What? Simon asked. I don't know. Jared didn't want to admit that for a moment he thought it was a ghost. Probably a squirrel? Simon looked at the wall with interest. Brocaded gold wallpaper hung limply, peeling and pocking in places. You think so? In the house? I always wanted a squirrel. No one seemed to think that something in the walls was anything to worry about, so Jared didn't say anything more about it. But as he carried the suitcase to the dining room, Jared couldn't help thinking about their tiny apartment in New York and their family before the divorce. He wished that this was some kind of gimmicky vacation and not real life. I hope you enjoyed Chapter 1. Look out tomorrow for Chapter 2, in which 2 walls are explored by vastly different methods.